Right, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen. Thanks for coming along. Oh, there we are. I think that should be me. I'm muted. I'm not sure you can hear me then. Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me this morning. Um, as I just mentioned, I'm actually back in our office in Croydon for the first time in about 6 months. So just getting myself set up is a bit different to normal. So bear with me if I'm a bit slow here and there. Technically, but otherwise should be fine. So um, I thought I would set up this session in light of Sharon moving the BSM forum meeting that Trafford normally hold, which would have been today. Um, I thought it would be a good opportunity to expand upon some of the ideas, not only that I was talking about, but also other members of the panel. And that's particularly around how we evidence your building safety claims. And I'm sure that hopefully makes sense already, but if it doesn't, we're gonna cover it nonetheless. So what I'd like to talk this morning is briefly about an introduction to who I am and why Evident is here. Then a quick overview of why do we need building safety cases. Um, that is just going to build on, again, what we were talking about last month. Then a deeper look into asking a question, is my building safe? And that's something I'm sure everyone on this call is going to be asking themselves of buildings at some point in the next, in the future. And then finally, using technology to evidence that claim. So to begin with, I'd like to spend a moment just explaining who we are as Evident. Evident are part of a larger group of companies as the SCCI group. And although Evident as a brand is relatively young, we've been a brand for maybe coming on about 3 years now. The product itself has actually been running for closer to 10 years. And where that came from is we recognized ourselves that we needed to be able to track our remote workforce. And this was particularly focusing on installing Sky into high-rise buildings, a lot of social housing buildings, and also one of the arms of our business is a fire and life contractor. So the ability to be able to track our workforce and you know do our own due diligence on our staff and get that assurance that the work was being done. And then if we fast forward through these slides briefly, sectors we serve. All sorts of different sectors with a lot of focus on places where people sleep and residential areas, prisons, social housing, new build properties, hospitality industry, with a lot of focus on technology. Currently, obviously here we're talking about building safety, but we're also heavily involved in fiber installations, CCTV, and as I mentioned, fire and life contracting ourselves. And the organization as a whole is just over 430 members with a turnover of just over 56 million. So the reason I wanted to sort of start there is to reassure everybody that Evident is part of an organization that is very robust and resilient. Although the brand and the name might be new to you, we are certainly not as a team. So why do we need building safety cases? No better introduction, and I'm sure everyone on this call is fully aware of the tragedy that happened at Grenfell. And that was exactly the same time that we had our Sky installation contracts. They took them in-house. And we realized that we had this piece of kit that actually, if we gave it a name and built, carried on developing it to be something more specialist, could serve the market more. And subsequently, we've had the Grenfell inquiry, which is obviously ongoing, a review of the housing sector, documents that we'll all be aware of, the HACKITT report or the white paper on social housing, and there are various others. And then the upcoming fire safety bill and building safety bills, that very much news of the day. I think we need to keep our eyes out for the fire safety bill coming back from the House of Commons, I think it is today. So keep your ears to the ground on that one. And so it was apparent, and I think everybody's probably in agreement, and hopefully that's why you're here, that we need to change how we manage our buildings to make sure that these low probability but high risk incidents don't happen again. So the HACKITT report discusses all sorts of sort of overtones, I guess, of building safety, but a theme that runs through it is the golden thread, a term again I'm sure everyone is very familiar with, but if not, it's all talking about this sort of transparency of information and having an audit trail and being able to have that reassurance and evidence that your building is built safe and also continues to be safe. Now, for the purpose of the discussion today and building upon the sort of messages from the last session with the BSM, we're going to be talking specifically about retrofitting into existing buildings rather than new buildings today. It's a separate discussion. There's separate legislation being drawn up for it. So for the purposes of today, we're focusing on buildings that are already standing and how we manage those, hopefully more effectively. So the golden thread of information, as I mentioned, a term I'm sure we're all very familiar with, but I think for me, the bedrock of that is about driving accountability through transparency. And I don't think really you can be very accountable if you don't have that transparency. And the wider that transparency spreads, all the more accountable you're creating these sort of lines of information, these threads of information throughout your organization. And coupled with that, the HACKITT report talks a lot about improved oversight for landlords. And this very much mirrored our own sort of wants when we had our fire and life contracts being serviced and wanting to have assurance and oversight ourselves of our workforce. And that was from the contractor side of the table. But on the other side of the table, obviously, is the landlord, of which many of you will be representing today. And it's about you having that information as well, and not waiting for that information from a contractor, and having a sort of single source of truth, which we'll come on to. So our mission, as you hopefully will remember from the talk last time, is to provide every landlord with the critical oversight needed to be confident in the safety of their buildings. Now, there's going to be quite a lot of information in this talk, and I'll do my best to not rattle through it too fast. And there's also, we're going to do a couple of anonymous surveys. So the first one I'd like to do now, and this is really so we can all understand, again, completely anonymously, where we all are. So if you give me a mo, I'm going to send around the first set of questions. So if everyone could answer this, it'll come into the chat. Foolishly, I didn't realize that actually you can run this within Zoom. So I've set these up within, hang on, let me get it to here. Within SurveyMonkey, but here should be your survey one coming up. It'll only take you about a minute to complete, so it's very short, 4 questions, I think. That should be in the chat now. Hopefully you can see it. And again, just to reassure, it's completely anonymous, and hopefully there's nothing too personal or anything in there. And if there is, feel free not to respond. But it would be good for us all, I think, to just understand where we are as a group of people and a group of organizations in our journey to building a safer future. So we'll just wait a mo. Fab, I can see some of those coming through. Thank you. Okay, just give it another 10 seconds, and we'll have a look at that. Right, last moment for anybody, and then we'll have a look. Okay, that's pretty much everyone. Let's have a look at the results there then. So looking at have we established building safety teams? I can show this actually to everyone. It's no problem. So you'll have this. So we can see yes is by vast majority, which is great to see. I've been talking to a lot of organisations about this, and it seems very much the sort of HR moment for building safety and building those teams, which is really great. How many high-risk buildings do we have in scope? So we can see the majority there between 11 and 50. Again, I think that mirrors a lot of the conversations that I've been having. But I think it's also important to really understand that even if you have one HRRB or high-risk building, that's absolutely in scope and as valid as the others. Which methods do we use to track our contractors? Some paper and some PDFs. Great to see that nobody said lots of paper. That's very reassuring. And we've got a fully digital system, which is also great. But the vast majority, again, some paper and some PDFs. I'm hoping there's probably some document scanners and things in there to try and make that a bit more intelligent. But this is definitely, again, a theme from the conversations that I'm having. And have we looked at any other digital building safety systems? So we're all looking. I hope that was probably evident from everybody joining the call. You'll excuse the pun. And if we're looking for digital building safety solutions, are you more likely to ask an industry body or look at a trade website? Really interesting stuff there. I've been seeing a lot of articles coming up on tech recently. So again, that makes sense. Fab. Let's so where we are, I guess, as a group is very much sort of looking how can we make the next step and take the next step into our building safety. So if we go back to the presentation, let's have a look at that. So you'll recall this slide for those of you who were at the BSM meeting on the 31st of March. This is one arm of the Clarion building safety case that Brent O'Halloran was discussing, and he's the lead on their building safety cases, and he's working very closely with Calderston, who are the building safety case experts for nuclear power stations. And if we have a look at some more detail here, you can see that this is built up through making a claim at the very top that your building is safe, and then structuring an argument beneath that, safe for residential general needs allocation. Now, I think it's the right thing to suggest that this is the role of a building safety team, and those who are responsible and responsible persons are to collate this argument and make that claim and substantiate it with the argument. And now Brent was talking about how every argument is going to be a sort of interwoven mix of subclaims. So you can see that here on the left, the building is maintained safely, or beneath that, the building is operated safely. And there's a number of examples here of subclaims. And then around that, you can see a number of assumptions and evidence bases to substantiate your subclaims. And that's really the system, as you'll see here, that we're expecting the building safety cases to be. Now, I've gave this presentation to some members of the Ministry of Housing yesterday, and also some representatives from HSE and some policy writers on Golden Thread, and everyone seemed to be in agreement that this will be the rough way to go. Now, they're never going to say there's one definitive right way to go, but this seems to be the consensus. So we'll start, as you can see here. This is Brent's slide, so I've stolen a couple of these bits from him, just to try and keep everything on the same path as it was last time. So you can see here at the top, we've got our structured argument, and the claim at the top, which has the argument underneath, and a group of subclaims, which will be supported by evidence. And you can see at the bottom the different type of evidence repositories here that Clarion are using to make their argument. Now, what sort of strikes me here is that it's a little bit like everything's everywhere, and that again mirrors the idea that there's lots of paper and lots of PDFs and lots of different repositories that data is going to be brought to make the argument. And to me, that seems like quite a fragmented approach, which doesn't seem the safest. And I think hopefully everyone would agree that if we can find methods to create a more joined up approach, then we should be able to deliver safety in buildings more effectively. So a couple of points here that I'll raise. There are multiple sources of information, which again moves away from the idea of golden thread mentality. There's a limited audit trail. Most Microsoft packages, for instance, don't have much of an audit trail at all, and various other ones don't either. Potentially a lot of manual process to analyze the data from all of these different resources. And finally, little or no standardization of data collection. And we'll move on to why I think that's so important in a moment. Now, where I would like to propose an improvement to this image would be to replace all of the evidence base with a single source of the truth, i.e. a golden thread. And in this case, I want to talk about how that can be evident. Now, I will caveat at this point, I think it would be unfair to suggest that any one system will always hold everything ever. But I think the evidence system, as I hope you'll see as we go through the presentation, can meet a lot of the needs for this evidence base. So if we have a look and take this same example, and we have a single source of information that covers across all of the evidence repositories, a full audit trail. Every user within Evident has their own profile, so you know exactly who has done what. A lot of automated processes to analyze that data, which is obviously going to save a lot of time in the organization bringing that information together. And standardized data collection and reporting. Again, I'll look back on why I think that's so important in a moment. But I think it's probably, I hope you agree that it makes sense to have one easy to navigate place where you build this accountability from, and it should be better for everybody as long as everyone has a simple way to access it. So we're talking really about a single source of the truth. So let me move on now to here. So we're now going to ask, is my building safe? And I think it's a very complex question, and I don't think there's anyone here who would deny that. And we here as a group of people in a sector need to find ways to answer this question. And now, if you remember the difference, Brent spoke about this, the difference between safety and compliance across our stock. Now, traditionally, we had a compliance hat on, and in the past, up until Grenfell, let's say, the idea was, is my building compliant? And that would actually break down into different disciplines of compliance, which you can see a number of them written down the left-hand side, gas, electric, fire, etc. And typically, that would be measured upon performance across your building. So is gas safe in this building? Is electrical safe in this building? That performance would be measured, and that is a horizontal or linear compliance method. And now the problem with this method is the gas may be safe, but if the electrical is deemed unsafe, then do we have a safe building? And that's really why we need to move, as Brent rightly pointed out, to a vertical or holistic model of building safety, where we look across discipline at all sorts of different KPIs that pertain to safety in a building. And that is what I want us to focus on right now. And finally, this slide from another one that I've cheekily nicked from. This was from the Ministry of the Housing, Communities and Local Government, from John, who gave the talk last time. He spoke about claims, arguments and evidence, as was the theme of the whole event. But 3 points that he brought up: a claim without an argument is unfounded, an argument without supporting evidence is unconvincing, and evidence without an argument and a claim is unexplained. So I want to look at how perhaps we could turn those three statements around and have a tick by all of them rather than a cross. I lied. This is one more slide from Clarion. This is the full extent of a building safety case and all of the claims and subclaims that they are making for one building. So again, it's a complex question, and we're all aware of that. And it's a journey that we're going on, and hopefully you'll agree that some of the techniques and ways that a software system can help you can simplify at least your workload to analyze this information. Yeah, let's move on. So this is the back to this slide is one of those trees where we're asking or making the claim that our building is safe. And I think the subclaims and evidence base here, for me, quite clearly falls into two camps. The first camp, as I've highlighted here, is around the day-to-day safety management of a building. So is the building maintained safely, operated safely, property meets fire risk assessment requirements, down the bottom compliance checks, etc. So I want to talk about track, react, and proof. This is the methodology of day-to-day management of a building that is built very much into the foundations of the evidence system, and hopefully a lot of your processes will follow this already, and software will only enhance that for you. So if we look at tracking safety, so tracking compliance here, tracking all planned, reactive, and mandatory works and outcomes. Here's an example of about 20 different types of inspection and assessments. Just the first ones that came to my head as an example of all of the different types of assessments that can be carried out within the evidence system. For instance, your CP12s or PAT testing, your lift inspections, whether that's the 6-monthly insurance inspections or just your monthly checks, and any number more. And it's really important to know that the evidence system will allow you to have all of your forms and documents created in a digital format, which is a good point to talk about. Standardizing data, as I mentioned, that I would come back to. So standardizing data, if you recall from my talk last time, I was talking about my experience with healthcare providers, and particularly in this example, I want to use home care providers. So we had organizations who would have hundreds of carers who would be out in the field working remotely and providing care to perhaps thousands of care receivers. Now, as an organization, it was fundamentally important for us to find a way that we could measure the care that was being delivered, not only to give ourselves peace of mind, but also to react to any trends that were arising that could be a hazard to somebody's health. And what was obvious to us then, and is still very much the case now, really in any industry, is if you standardize your data collection, you can easily measure that data. And that means that you can analyze trends and react to it far faster than if you have lots of different ways and different types of data coming into you. So the system here will allow you to create standardized forms, and these can follow recommendations from BAIF or British standards. They're fully customizable, and because they're based in a cloud, it means if, for instance, as we've had with the PAS 79 debacle, which we won't go into, but if the British standard changes, you can change the form to match that instantly for everybody. So the next person to carry out, say, a fire door check or a risk assessment will have the most recent and up to date, and in that case compliant document to hand immediately. And that's why standardizing data is so important. Now, tracking compliance, very important, again, as I mentioned at the start, not only to track the linear performance, which we all need to keep a measure of, but what's more important is to have a method of registering that holistically. So you have a number of dashboards which react to changes, as you can see here with RAG statuses suggesting that there is an issue with this building. Perhaps it's still compliant, but there's something that you need to address. Or more seriously, you can have quick assessments of that information by visual cues rather than sort of trawling through lots of data. So second to tracking, what is our responsibility and our remit as this group of people in our teams is going to be to react and manage that information. All 3 points here are of equal importance. So reacting to information, managing those risks, recommendations, and any remedial work statuses in real time. So this is about, again, not having a line in the stand and saying, everything was okay yesterday, but is everything okay right now? And being able to answer that question is something that having a system by which you can pull together all this information and read it simply is a fundamental part of achieving that kind of view of a building. So one of the ways that you would have that is through tracking all of the tasks that are against a building. So they have different statuses set against a task. You can see quickly, you can measure how much is still awaiting action and how much your team has actioned, or indeed been declined or is still under review. And every task within the system is an individual entity that will have a reason, a due date, and a status, and more information underneath that. But as a very high level way of tracking what's going on, you'll be able to view that very simply. And then finally, and as I say, I was going to say of most importance, but of equal importance is the proof that you're managing all of this information and tracking it and reacting it. So proof really is where the golden thread, I think, really starts to come into its own. Who did what, where, and when, and having that information available not just right now, but for the future when we're going to need it, even in 50 years or 100 years, as was very much brought up by the group of policy writers yesterday for the golden thread policy. It's so important that we start building this data right now, so that in the future we have that information to hand if we ever need it. And it's a big question, and one for another time from now to look into. What are the most important bits and vital data to track? So perhaps we can arrange a separate session to look into that in more detail. But simply here you can see tracking the proof. Everything in the system has a user stamp against it. So you can see here we have an audit completed by a chap called Angus. And what was completed, we've got an inspection of a smoke detector. Now you have the option of tagging assets, as I'm sure is not something that's new to you. And that is just another way of proving somebody was literally at this smoke detector, not just in the corridor, not just in the building, but at this very item, if that's something that's important to you. And I think with some types of equipment that will be important. For instance, fire doors, makes quite a lot of sense to tag a fire door, but perhaps emergency lights lesser so, although still valid, perhaps an argument could be made. You can see here the device has pinged its GPS location when the audit was completed, so you know exactly where the individual was, or at least the device was, when the inspection was completed, and all the information about when that was completed, the time and date. So that's the first half of or roughly half of the subsection of claims here that Brent was discussing last time. Now, if I highlight roughly the second group, however, I think it's important to appreciate there is some crossover here, because just like the holistic manner in which we need to approach building safety, there is always going to be crossover and things will fit into different camps. But roughly here, I think the other half of the claims fit more into a sort of governance hat, and around documentation and having the information on a building to hand. For instance, the information around a property meeting minimum standards of construction, or the gained regulation approval, etc. So let's have a look at this. So building information and documentation, the three things that I think are vital to managing this effectively is having that information accessible, so that those who need the information have that information to hand. And again, that was a phrase that HSE were banging on about yesterday, and I think it's a very vital one. Who needs what when they need it? Comprehensive, so it covers everything that's required, not necessarily just under regulation, but also everything that you as a building safety professional deem to be important. I think it's really important actually at this point to highlight that Evident is not here to answer the question, is my building safe? Evident is here to give you the tools to make that judgment. You know, you are the specialist. Your teams are the specialists. The individuals here with the training. We are the toolkit to support your mission. And finally, I think it's important for them to be unique to the building. So we don't have a sort of blanket across box ticking exercise across all buildings. So how do we do that? Building information, you'll have a profile for each building, and that will contain the important information about a building. Again, a number of key data points here: the name and location, building type, structural information, risk category, building safety managers information, and a number of others. And really, this is a custom set of data that we can work with you to get right. But as an example here, you can see on the left-hand side a number of building information points. As I mentioned, the evacuation strategy, the risk category of a building. Now, this is another good point to stop and discuss the building safety mission rather than the evident mission. This is something that we worked on with Hyde Housing, this whole page here, really, which was there. What is our minimum information we want to have to hand on the front page of our building profiles? And risk category is something that they assess themselves. So they have their internal team of building safety managers of various different titles actually in Hyde, but roughly falling under the team of building safety, and they will assess using information in Evident the risk category of a building, and then they will be setting that. And finally, the building safety manager's information, again, so important. We're seeing, obviously, caveat, it's still at draft form, but the building safety bill makes it very clear that the visibility of this individual is going to be very important. And I'm sure that is some of you, or perhaps some of the members of your teams, to have this information readily available and the responsible person to sort of be very visible. And finally, having a list of safety equipment, so the constituent parts that make up the building and make up some of the compliance questions that you need to ask around how it's being maintained. And then documentation storage, standardizing and storing all documents centrally for simple access anywhere. Again, a number of documents here that are heavily mentioned in documents like the fire safety bill and the building safety bill and other pieces of legislation that are some at draft form, but others that are already there. Having the FEEPs available, any risk assessments available, and obviously we need to think about whether that's going to be available to just internal teams or our residents. Resident engagement plans, any procedures, complaints procedures, etc., floor plans, building certificates. If we go forward with an assurance certificate that will be issued by HSE every 5 years or so, which looks like the model, that's certainly the impression that we're getting from the powers that be, that it will be a assessment every so often, unless any major changes happen to the building, and a safety certificate will be awarded that will last for 5 years. That's stored against the building. O&M manuals, individuals competency certificates. Again, this is heralding back to where the fire safety bill, as an example, talks about the individual who carried out a risk assessment, a fire risk assessment on the building, having the appropriate certification. So that's simple for you to identify and answer that question. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. Here is an example of a building profile, and you can see down the bottom right-hand corner, a number of those documents here are stored against this building, and simply you would click on that document and it would bring it back to you. So I appreciate that was a lot of information, and I want to come back to this tree for a moment, where we are claiming at the very top, is this building safe? And we as a team here have made the argument safe for residential general needs. Now, I hope you have seen within Evident, as an example, you would be able to keep the evidence for all of these claims and subclaims and that will give you the toolkit, as I said, to make your argument and establish whether that argument holds up under the scrutiny of for instance, HSE or the regulator. If that changes, you need to have that information to hand. And asking the question, is my building safe? If we reverse engineer the claims arguments evidence base, what's important is to start, you have the evidence for your teams to be able to make their argument and substantiate their claim that the building is safe. So that was a run through of how we would meet a number of those subclaims that Brent spoke about. Now I've got another quick survey here that I'm going to pop out, and we'll have a look at the results there, which this one will be slightly different to, well, it is a different set of questions, but again, it's I think it's four questions, this one, so it's nothing much, and will only take us a moment to answer. Sorry, Scott, I did just see your question as well about confirming that an HRRB is a high-risk residential building. It's very true. Yep, I'm sorry if I said that wrong during, but it's a bit of a tongue twister with all these acronyms. Right, let me get there. So I think it's absolutely true, and that's going to be a moving beast that we all need to be aware of as well. Is the scope of buildings that fall into high risk is probably going to grow exponentially from where it is right now, as we establish different ways of measuring risks, and that's something again that was very much brought up in the session we had yesterday with the Ministry for Housing and HSE, is about being able to have data sets that we can measure key performance across the sector. So as a group, not just as individual organizations, we can learn from both, best practice, but also where we need to perhaps improve. So those questions should be there. We'll just do another minute, but hopefully they are pretty quick to do for you. Fab. I can see some of the responses coming in, so thank you. Just do another 20 seconds or so, and again, just reassure everyone it's completely anonymous, as you could probably see from when we looked at the results last time. Okay, another 10 seconds from everyone, just to make sure we've got as many in there. Fab. Okay, let's have a look at the results there. So this looks a bit more specifically and at some of the stuff that we've been talking about during this session. Let's expand here. So how important do you think tracking day-to-day safety is to managing the safety of the buildings? Unsurprisingly, I think that everybody has agreed that it's extremely important, and we could probably talk all day about why that's important. So I'm glad we're all in agreement. How important do you think standardizing your data collection is to managing your building safely? Roughly everyone in agreement. Again, I'm sure you could see that was something that I'm very passionate about, and hopefully we will all become more and more passionate about that as we see the positive effect measuring that information can have for our residents ultimately. How important do you think having real-time information is to managing your building safely? So a couple of somewhat's important in there, which is interesting. But again, the majority, I think we agree that having at least that data to hand very quickly. I'm sure those of you who said somewhat, if not real-time, would agree. And then, do you currently have a timeline for going digital and being prepared for the change? In the next 3 months, that's great. Again, I'm talking to a lot of organizations where it's very much the agenda point is how we're going to manage our buildings ASAP, and then some far-reaching or longer-reaching timelines there. I think it's to be expected that we need to take a phased approach to delivering some of the changes that are going to come in through the different bills, and generally just I think is our obligations as housing providers and safety professionals. It's important that we take manageable steps. So great to see. Um, Fabulous. Let's go back to my slides now. That's all with the slides. I certainly have no intention of going too PowerPoint heavy. I think it was a lot of information. I think there is a lot more to discuss around how Evident could work specifically for you and your organization. So I think, it would be great to follow this up perhaps with some more, you know, personal one-to-one meetings where we can look at in more real terms. But let's look at any questions and answers that rather questions that you have for me, and answers that hopefully I have for you. I can see some that have come in already. Please pop them in the chat where we have them. Let's have a look. Okay, so I've got a one here around, do you have user pipes set up in the system so only the right people can see the right things? Yes, setting up user permissions is very simple, and that can be done in a number of ways. You can set up permissions by somebody's role, competency, skill set, their location. So you'd have, maybe super users who would have access to everything, and then a gas contractor wouldn't have access to everything, as an example. This is a good one coming in around how would we evidence this, good use of the word, to HSE. So I guess that's pertaining to building safety case reports. Again, we were talking with a chap from HSE yesterday, and their idea will be that you will prepare, or your building safety manager will prepare a report to be able to present to them. We did discuss the idea of them having access to, and that's definitely an idea. But you having that data to hand to build your report using a system such as Evident will help make that clear for you, especially if you're, for instance, you have a dashboard that is most of that report to hand at any given moment. Oh, this is a good question around residential engagement. How are we supporting the resident engagement agenda? Something that is really, I think, on point and very interesting, and we discuss internally a lot. Our short-term plan is to have a residential portal available for residents to go in and sort of get a big green tick to say my building's safe, and show them all of that information. The reason we haven't got that already is we're making sure that there's no security concerns when we roll it out to larger data set of users in a resident form, because they're not all going to be employees. We've got to take the security very seriously, so we're just making sure that we can do that. But some organizations that we have been using, actually setting up residents as users to perform low-level checks, like corridor checks, for instance. So we all know we've got a particularly vocal resident. We have to do is turn to Twitter to find a handful of those, and they found it very empowering to have that ability and to feel part of the safety of a building. So as an example, that's another way that we're looking to support that. And any ideas welcome, by the way. We're definitely interested in growing with you and coming on this journey together. This is a good one around seeing as the bill hasn't come in. How do we make sure that we're not going to be wasting time and money putting in the wrong system? It's a very good point, and it's one that we are very keen to be on point with, and actually do the heavy lifting for you. And that's why we are talking to, as I said, I had a meeting yesterday with some members from the Ministry of Housing, policy writers of Golden Thread, and people from HSE, to make sure that where we're going is in line with what their expectations are going to be. And they're never going to say use this system or that system. They are going to come up with a set of guidelines to make sure that we as software engineers and software producers have a clear path to give you the tools you need to be successful in your role. And I'm not sure that it would be right to, to say that they to say what they thought of the system, but the meeting went very well. So read between the lines on that. I've got a question here around, in terms of the safety case report, would the system generate the information? I guess that's, would it sort of generate a safety case report? And again, I'll at risk of repeating myself, but I think it's really important. We as Evident, and me as a representative of Evident, we're not going to answer the question, is my building safe? That is the skill set of the building safety team, but we will give you the tools to make answering that question much simpler for you. And so when it comes to generating a safety case report, we will be able to give you all sorts of data that you will be able to judge, is this critical to my safety case report, and then use that in your safety case reports. Who knows what the future has? Maybe there'll be a big red button on the front that says generate a safety case report. But I think that would devalue the value of having a building safety team and individual, because you're going to be so important to the safety of residents, across the world, I'm sure, after Grenfell. How much does it cost? Always an important question. Well, as an example, it tends to be somewhere around the same price as my excuse me, as my mobile phone bill per month per block. Sometimes even a lot less than that. But as I said, let's set up a one-to-one session, and we can give you that in black and white terms of what it would look like commercially for your organization. As it's always going to be different, but ultimately it's per block, and it scales with how many blocks you have, but tends to be a phone bill or less. Okay, we've got a couple of them around standardizing. When we talk about standardizing everything, how can you make sure everyone has the most up-to-date forms? Again, it being cloud-based, so the users would have an app, and if you make a change to the cloud, the servers that we manage, that will be pushed out to all users instantly. So the next time I go and try and, even if it was I make a change right now and then I go and try and perform an inspection 10 seconds later, even 1 second later, that change will have happened. So you get that global management. And then what did HSE think? Yeah, I can't really go into it to be too prescriptive, but I think they were impressed with the golden thread that we were showing, and generally the safety management system that compromises Evident. Okay, fab. Well, any more questions? Feel free to email me. I'll pop you all an email afterwards, just with my contact details if you don't have them already. And I hope you all agree that Evident has a lot of the functions and features that will support your building safety, and it's really important that we move forward with a sort of proactive attitude. We've seen comments from this Angela McLeod, I think her name is, and Dame Judith Hackett, around being proactive, and now that we see appointments to the head of HSE and the bills coming more and more into legislation and becoming acts rather than bills, it's really important that we're ahead of that curve, because the last thing that you want to be is scrabbling around to make sure that you have this info for HSE if they come knocking. Again, that's the journey we went through with care providers, and proactivity and making measured steps that mean your organization can kind of move into a digital age of managing your buildings will be a really rewarding journey for you and your teams, I'm sure. Thank you all for joining. I'll send some emails round to you, and I think it would probably be a good idea for us all to set up some one-to-ones and understand if Evident's going to be right for you or not in real time. I think that's probably a good next step. So Have a great rest of your day. The BSM meeting is happening still in a couple of weeks' time. Sharon messaged around, so I'm sure you've had that, which will be another great session. And let's keep on our mission to make our buildings safer for our residents. Thank you very much.